During last year's Star Trek Day video, I said something stupid. I'm not saying Voyager is unwatchable because it's not. Let me put it this way. If you went through all 79 episodes of Star Trek the original series and trimmed out all the episodes that weren't just bad, but irredeemable garbage, you would still have 73 episodes left. If you did the same thing with Voyager and just pulled out all the truly great episodes produced over 7 years, you would have enough for one brilliant season of 26 episodes. Yeah, it was a bit of an exaggeration, but that is one of my most popular videos ever, so it's inevitable that it would get a sequel. Actually, doing a list of those episodes would make for some of the most low effort content ever, so let's just get on with it. Number 1 and 2, The Caretaker. As much as I ragged on this one in my previous video, I have to say, as far as Voyager episodes go, this one is pretty good. Most of my complaints stem from the fact that had they stuck to the original plan, it could have been so much better. The fact that it is a two-parter, which means I can now do even less work, it's just icing on the cake. Number 3, Faces. This is another episode I ragged on in my previous video. Mostly because it did something Voyager did far too often. Thematic sequels or out-and-out remakes of episodes of previous Trek shows. In this case, The Enemy Within. I give this one a pass because apart from they split B'Elanna into an aggressive and docile side, that's where the similarities stop. Plus, Roxanne Dawson gives a hell of a performance as B'Elanna comes to terms with the fact that her Klingon and human sides aren't really two separate people, but one complete B'Elanna Torres. Number 4, Jetrel. Most of the time, Neelix is written as a comic relief character. It works because Ethan Phillips is a really funny guy. However, this is the first time we see him as something more than that. Both the nasty space pirate he tried to pass himself as early on and the perpetual people pleaser he became stem from a place of tragedy. The big revelation is that Talax and this alien planet were at war. The other side used a super weapon that wiped out the colony where Neelix grew up. They come across the guy who invented this weapon in need of aid. Neelix advises Janeway not to help him. Dr. Jetrel says, "Hey, look, I don't blame you for acting this way, but I have not tried to hide what I did during the war. I have spent every day since then trying to cure the illnesses and diseases that are now plaguing your people. At least one of which you're bound to develop. But I'm so close to finding a cure. If I had access to a transporter and the radioactive cloud, I'm sure I could fix all of it." Neelix is skeptical and angry. Janeway asks, "Is all your rage really worth the lives of thousands of people? Neelix says, no, I just really don't like the guy. Oh, and Neelix proves himself exceptionally trustworthy. All his vaunted experience with the Galaxian Defense Forces was for desertion. They make it to the moon. Neelix goes to sickbay and finds the EMH has been shut off and Chatrell is performing a different kind of experiment. Neelix asks, what the hell are you doing? Chatrell knocks him out and makes his way to the transporter. Security tries to stop him. Janeway and Neelix come in. Chatrell says, if my experiment works, I can bring all of these people back to life. Now things are sort of reversed. Janeway is skeptical, and Neelix wants to let him try. So Janeway allows it, but she's not surprised when it doesn't work. Chatrell says, remember when I said you might end up with some sort of illness? I was lying. I was trying to cure myself. If it means anything, I did come to care for some of the Galaxians who became my patients. Neelix says, look, I'm not going to say you didn't hurt my people because you did. But the truth is, my people did a lot of things I didn't agree with during the war. But you tried to make things right. I don't think a lot of people would have. In fact, if our situations were reversed, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. So, I guess I forgive you. And then Chatrell dies. Number 5, Death Wish. What else I complain about with Star Trek Voyager? Episodes that cross over with other Trek shows simply because they can. It's really hard to justify when your series is set 70,000 light years from the Alpha Quadrant. Q is one of the few characters where it would make sense. You know what I love when Star Trek does them? Episodes that are allegories for real-world social issues with sci-fi trappings. In this case, the right to die. Yeah, the Riker cameo was a bit cringy, but Kate Mulgrew, John Delancey, and Garrett Graham give some great performances. Number 6, Tuvix. A lot of people don't like this episode because of its silly premise and the ending. I'm the first to admit the idea of Tuvok and Neelix becoming a merged being via transporter accident is a tad ridiculous. The ending, not so much. The rest of the episode has the crew adjusting to life with the new combined person, dubbed Tuvix. Kaz has the most awkward period of adjustment since she has to mourn Neelix, who was her lover, and Tuvok, who was her teacher. Meanwhile, the combined being who has all their memories and feelings, but is a person in his own right, is falling in love with her. It gets even more complicated once Harry figures out a way to separate Tuvok and Neelix. Tuvix pleads for his right to exist, and wow, that ending! It is really hard, if not impossible, to continue liking every main character on the show apart from the Doctor after they all conspire to murder a guy. Number 7 and 8, Future's End Part 1 and 2. I love a good time travel story, just not the whole deletes itself at the end because the writers have themselves trapped in a corner sort of thing that so many Star Trek time travel episodes are. Yeah, this one sort of has that unwinding of a time paradox thing going on, but it doesn't do that. It does have that, oh, we got them to Earth, but we've got to send them back to the Delta Quadrant, otherwise we don't have a show trap. But the events do matter, especially for the Doctor. The episode has a great villain, a greedy businessman obsessed with reverse engineering future tech. The fact that he's played by Ed Begley Jr., who pretty openly opposes that sort of unrestrained greed at the expense of our environment types in real life, is interesting. But what really holds the episode together is the chemistry between Tom Paris and Rain Robinson, who was played by a then relatively unknown Sarah Silverman. Number 9, The Q and the Gray. I like Q episodes. Unlike Death Wish, this one is back to a more silly Q. In spite of some of its more apocalyptic themes. It seems when Janeway allowed Quinn to die, it made the Q continuum change its mind on a lot of things. They're no longer a peaceful, godlike society. They no longer just choose to die, they choose to murder. And I don't just mean mortals, I mean other Q. This puts them in a state of civil war. So Q comes up with the idea of mating with a human to produce an offspring which will somehow force the Q into the next stage of their evolution. I know it's ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun. Number 10, Blood Fever. This episode would be problematic if it weren't performed just right. You see, B'Elanna has this Vulcan engineer named Vorik on her team. He gets a bit cranky. He lashes out. They take him to sickbay. It turns out he's in the middle of Ponfar, the Vulcan hump or death syndrome. He had his eye on B'Elanna because she's half Klingon, which means, YouTube won't let me explain this. Do yourself a favor and read Larry Niven's Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex. Anyway, B'Elanna was one of the people who restrained him. Vulcans are touch telepaths, but since Vorik didn't have much control during Ponfar, he instigates an accidental mind meld. Now she's got the horniness too, only she doesn't show symptoms quite yet. In fact, they don't kick in until she's already on an away mission with Paris and Neelix. They're down on this planet trying to figure out what made all these colonists up and leave. But since they're not around, they decide to scavenge the place for any materials that might help them fix the ship's warp drive. On the ship, the Doctor and Tuvok are trying to help Vorik by putting him through the types of holodeck programs you usually see on Deep Space Nine or Lower Decks, but they aren't helping that much. Down on the planet, Torres is being snarkier and snarkier with Neelix and more sexually aggressive with Paris. This puts him in a awkward situation. This is a 3rd season episode, so he's not an idiot yet. But he was clearly attracted to B'Elanna's human half in the episode Faces, and it developed sort of a bond with her Klingon side. If she were in the right state of mind to consent, he would be totally down for it. But he knows she's not, so he tries to fight her off. Too bad Klingons consider that foreplay. It becomes a rom-com up until they realize what made the colonists up and leave. The Borg are coming. Bum, bum, bum. Number 11, Real Life. This episode is a quiet one as the crew discovers the Doctor has been transferring his program to the holodeck to run simulations of what things would be like if he were a real person. All the way down to a family and a house in the suburbs. The rest of the crew thinks it's weird and gives him unrealistic expectations of what humanoid families are like. So B'Elanna tweaks the program to make it more realistic. There's a handy-dandy side plot about a first contact situation, but the real story is watching the Doctor's simulated life go to hell and how it affects his life outside the holodeck. It's tragic, but it gives some real depth to the Doctor. Number 12 and 13. The Scorpion, Part 1 and 2. Yeah, these episodes rely on Chakotay doing his racist caricature routine for a few scenes, including telling the famous story of the scorpion and the frog. But it's the only time in the entire series where the Borg feel like a real threat to Voyager. And the crew have gone as far as they can go in the Delta Quadrant without traveling through Borg space. But there's a twist. They encounter species 8472, a race so deadly that even the Borg fear them. They can snap Borg drones like a twig and destroy cubes like that. So the Borg offer Voyager a deal. They use their ingenuity to help them fight species 8472, and the Borg will give them safe passage through their space. A lot of Voyager's crew, both Starfleet and Maquis, fought at the Battle of Wolf 359 or the Battle for Sector 001, so they're reluctant to form an alliance. Plus, it's not like the Borg are going to hand over files and equipment without an overseer in the form of 7 of 9. They take the deal because they have no other choice. Yeah, when Janeway is unable to get instant results, the Borg try to weasel their way out of it. But once they start losing cubes left and right, they reinstate it. Voyager goes into fluidic space and seals it off. At least for now. Upon discovering that 7 of 9 used to be human, Janeway and the Doctor deassimilate her against her will. So if you look at things from the Borg's point of view, they're the frogs of the story. Number 14, The Gift. This episode is kinda, sorta a sequel to The Scorpion, in that A, 7 of 9 comes to terms with what Janeway did to her and her subsequent rejection by the Borg Collective, and B, Cass recovers from whatever fluidic space did to her. Well, if by recover you mean realizes that all those psychic powers she's supposed to have are all coming out at once, and she's transcending physical existence. The 7 of 9 story is really good. The Cass story, not so much. It is a fitting way to write her off, and better than the original plan. That's all I can say about that. Anyway, since this marks the end of the Cass years of Voyager and the start of the 7 of 9 era, I think this is where I'm going to break this one up. Be back for part 2 very soon.